Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. Today is part 2 of the legendary Tour de France. Now, hopefully you tuned into yesterday's part 1 where I covered stages 1 through 10. And if you took anything out of that stage 1 through 10, I want you to take that Tadej Pogacar has done a lot of work on his own throughout a few of those stages. Stage 4, stage 5 for sure. And then, of course, Planche de Belfi. The kid was on fire and won at Planche de Belfi and won stage 6, that ridiculous stage from Wout van Aert. That gets us into stage 11 with a 39-second advantage over Jonas Vingegaard for Tadej Pogacar. Now, when you're coming into stage 11 in your UAE Team Emirates, you're already down one rider before the Tour de France started because Mark Hirschi came into it sick and not on top form, taking the place of Matteo Trentin, who went COVID positive. But on top of that, when you start stage 11, you're out George Bennett. George Bennett dropped out COVID positive on stage 9 of the Tour de France. And then if you go back to stage 11, they lost Vegard Stackelegen there. So they're down 2 more riders. So they have basically 5.5 riders to start this stage because Mark Hirschi came into the Tour de France on bad form after being sick with COVID. Rightfully so. He's going to do a magnificent job on not putting the Swiss rider down. He's fantastic. But keep that in mind. You have 5 solid riders when you get into the mountains. And every time throughout the Tour de France, when they've hit the climbs or been near the finish, we've seen Mark Hirschi drop off the back. So when stage 11 starts, it's going to be an exciting stage. Peloton's going to be full gas all day long. And this is going to be one of the greatest Tour de France stages that you could watch. As the racing starts, guess who's going up the road? It's Wout van Aert, of course, going up the road. And he's got some company with Mathieu van der Poel, his cyclocross companion that those guys duel all throughout their whole career at the cyclocross races and the classics. And now it looks like they're going to duel here on stage 11 of the Tour de France. Well, it takes about 30 kilometers, and then about 20 guys come together. With that 20 guys, Wout van Aert, remember, he's been going full gas with Mathieu van der Poel for about 30 kilometers. And then with that other group of about 16, 17 riders that come up because Catania went solo across for the Soudal Quick-Step or Quick-Step to Kunik, whichever team they were that year. It gets me confused every time. But their group will be just about 20 riders when it all comes together 30 kilometers later. Now there's going to be a difficult climb straight away. That's right after they get caught. And we see that the gap is at about 4 minutes to the peloton behind, and it'll extend up to 5 and 6, 7, and 8 minutes throughout this stage. But there's nobody in this group of 20 that's really a threat. Best guy in general classification is Warren Barguil, the Arkea Samsic rider, but he's more than 13 minutes back on the GC and really not a threat considering we're at stage 11 and Tadej Pogacar can climb better than anybody in the world, just about, so we thought when stage 11 started. But we see the group of 20 go up the road. They hit the first climb at just about 3.5 kilometers long, but super difficult at around 8%. Hard climb. This is when we see Mathieu van der Poel drop out of the Tour de France because he's had a hard beginning here at the Tour de France and he'll drop from this front group. Now, what's happening? Well, Wout van Aert and Christophe Laporte always dominating at the front of this breakaway group here, keeping it motivated. But in general, they had a lot of help. Almost everybody in this group I saw coming through. And so the time gap keeps going up and up. Now, we get all the way into the start of the Telegraph. This is going to be a monster climb. First part of the Telegraph, we're talking about 12 kilometers long all the way up, and then you're going to drop about 2 kilometers down, and then of course you start the Galibier, and the Galibier's at over 17 kilometers is a monster in itself. So we're talking about almost 30 kilometers worth of climbing here once the stage starts proper. Now, what's happening up front? Well, we see the breakaway, and of course Christophe Laporte's getting dropped, and it's his teammate up front, Wout van Aert, that's drilling. Now the cameras will lose Christophe Laporte for the rest here on the Telegraph, and we won't know exactly what's going on, but we kind of know what's going on if you got some tactical brains, because you know Jumbo-Visma didn't put 2 guys and try to get 3 and 4 guys into this front move for no reason at all. So Christophe Laporte's out of the picture, but Wout van Aert's driving the group up there. We see the breakaway breaking up all over the place. Then we go back to the peloton, and this is when things get exciting. First, we saw Mark Hirschi lead into the Col de Telegraph, and he's on the front and then drops off after doing about 4 kilometers. Then we're going to see Mikkel Bjerg, the rider up front that's always near near Tadej Pogacar here at the Tour de France last few seasons. And now Bjerg's going to do about 3 kilometers, and then he'll blow on the front, and we'll see Marc Soler. Soler will get on the front, and he'll hold pace for a little bit, and then all of a sudden the fireworks really start. Now when the fireworks start from Tiesj Benoot, he's going to throw in a hard acceleration. We're going to see Primož Roglič go with it, and then just behind that we're going to see Adam Yates, Team Ineos, and then Tadej Pogacar following the move quickly with Jonas Vingegaard on his wheel. Now, when you're in a professional peloton and when you're racing, anyone can light the flame, but now you need to know how to blow the flame out. This is when everything starts going wrong for UAE Team Emirates. Now, if we back the film up way before, we go back to the 2022 season before the Tour de France started, I was working for NBC, and we got to speak with all the directors sportifs, well, not all of them, but a lot of them, and one of them was UAE Team Emirates Machin. Now, Machin used to be my own director, so I know him personally, and he's a great guy. I would work for the guy anytime. He's fantastic. The morale on the team is beautiful, but while we're having that phone call conversation with NBC and UAE Team Emirates director, I said, hey, Machin, you guys are bringing Soler. What about the Solerism? Is there any problems? Do you guys have any problems having Soler on the team? Because I remember at Volta a Catalunya when he just sat up and they end up losing the general classification that year. And well, Soler has a lot of Solerism around him that only this rider has. So I had to ask the question there for NBC before the Tour de France started. And Machin said, everybody loves Marc Soler, Chris. He's a fantastic guy and he goes really deep and hard. We love him and we want him on the team. Well, we get here in the Tour de France. Like I said, Soler is on the front. We saw the first attack from Tiesj Benoot. Then we're going to see Marc Soler ride back up there to the front of the group. We saw Jumbo-Visma first pulling hard, and you look at Jumbo-Visma, it was Soler, it was another Jumbo-Visma rider, I believe it was Primož Roglič, then it was Brandon McNulty, then there was another Jumbo-Visma guy, and Tadej Pogacar all lined up, and then we see Tiesj Benoot get on the radio, and he decides that with Jumbo-Visma's talking back there, back and forth, all of a sudden Jumbo-Visma come off the front, and UAE Team Emirates are on the front. Now, this is the point where Soler and Brandon McNulty at the front of the peloton, those two riders can shut things down and back the throttle off as much as they can. They don't need to go full gas. Soler originally riding up at the beginning here after Bjerg blew and Soler got on the front. You look at the size of the peloton, when I back the film up, it's still pretty wide, so you know he's not going full gas on the front. But you look at the size of the group now, it's all GC favorites up here. Marc Soler is keeping the pace a little harder than you need to do. Remember, at this point in time in the race, Tadej Pogacar has the race leader's yellow jersey. He's wearing it and shining brightly on him. And he's got a 39-second gap over Jonas Vingegaard. We look at Primož Roglič, and Primož Roglič crashed on stage 5 of the cobblestone, like I told you in part 1, and he's down almost 3 minutes on the general classification. So if I'm Tadej Pogacar, I'm thinking I want to get all my guys over the Telegraph, the Galibier, and then down the long 30-kilometer descent all the way in the Col de Granon, because once you get into the Col de Granon at 11.3 kilometers and 9%, that's a monster of climb. You can win the Tour de France and you can lose the Tour de France on the Col de Granon, or you can lose it sooner. Well, we see UAE Team Emirates on the front, setting pace a little faster than I like. I would like them to back the throttle off because they don't look exactly sharp at this moment in the race, and they're down one George Bennett and one Vingegaard. That's a lot of power missing, and you've already dropped two teammates, Mark Hirschi and Mikkel Bjerg from the front group. That means you're limited numbers. They go a little bit harder than I like. Once they get close to the top of the KOM, we see Jumbo-Visma, Tiesj Benoot. He's on the front again, and he's driving as hard as we can. We see up front, and which goes to the breakaway. Nothing much is happening there except for Wout van Aert's driving it some more. And that's the real threat up here on the general classification. If a Tadej Pogacar lets Primož Roglič or Jonas Vingegaard especially go up the road and attach onto Wout van Aert, that's a dangerous move. Now we get up to near the KOM, we look at the gap. All of a sudden, UAE Team Emirates have opened up a gap to Tiesj Benoot and Marc Soler. Marc Soler's locked on the Tiesj Benoot's wheel. They're coming up to the KOM, and Marc Soler does another tactical move. It's a small one at this point in time, but if you look, he's side by side there with Tiesj Benoot, and there's no reason to be side by side. Marc Soler, UAE Team Emirates. If Jumbo-Visma want to control the race, they want to light the flame, just slop behind them, and that flame will eventually fan out. It's bound to. Once you get in the headwind there, the wind will blow out energy on anybody, as we'll see later here in this stage 11. Now, going over the top of the KOM, those two riders are side by side, and then Primož Roglič bolts out of the group from behind. Tadej Pogacar follows directly, and they drop down the descent, and all of a sudden, look in the picture just on the left side of the screen, that's, of course, Christophe Laporte, who's been waiting and going easy all the way up the Col de Telegraph for this exact moment. Well, now he's on the front, pulling as hard as we can, and we see Primož Roglič, Jonas Vingegaard, Tadej Pogacar, and Enric Mas from Movistar's in this front group. Now what happens when we look a little further back? Well, that's Marc Soler back there, the Solerism, and he's got Geraint Thomas on his wheel. Soler's getting upset, and he doesn't want to pull all the way to close this gap, so he wants Geraint Thomas to close it. Geraint Thomas launches off his wheel going down the descent there, the 2-kilometer descent before the climb of the Galibier starts. He throws into the draft there of Mas, who's dropping off the front group for what reason? I have no idea. Maybe he had a flat, or maybe he's just been descending bad, because I know later at this Tour de France, his descending skills were horrendous. But at this point in the race, this is not a crazy technical descent, and I've done it a few times in my career. So we see Geraint Thomas will slingshot off the draft of Enric Mas, go flying by Enric Mas, and it'll put 5 guys in that front group because Soler was back there doing Solerism tricks. Now we're back to film up one more time, just a little bit further back, going down the same descent. Look at the peloton back there of GC favorites. 2 UAE Team Emirates riders on the front. That's Brandon McNulty and Rafael Majka. Those two guys, same thing, just like up front with Soler. They don't want to close the gap either. So they move off to the side and wave their arms, but nobody else can close the gap, and that's what causes these 5 guys to extend their gap out before the Galibier starts proper, because Christophe Laporte is on the front full gas. Laporte will get them into the Galibier starting proper. Primož Roglič throwing the first attack. Jonas Vingegaard the second, Primož Roglič the third, and all 3 of these attacks were covered by Tadej Pogacar. And then the Slovenian Tadej Pogacar, #1 rider in the world, while wearing the race leader's yellow jersey, does a massive mistake. He throws in the next attack #4 on the Galibier, and this is not what you want to do, guys. If you watched the Tour de France last year, the year before this, in 2021, you'll see that Tadej Pogacar on stage 8, he dropped everybody in the rain, dropped down the descent, and went up the Col de Galibier and soloed up and caught everybody and ended up finishing 3rd, I believe 4th on the stage there when they finished in Le Granon. Now, as we look back at that stage, you think, wow, Tadej Pogacar, he can go solo. You can't go solo. It's not even a question of trying to go solo up the Galibier, because you have Wout van Aert up the road. So if he goes solo, let's just say for giggles here, Tadej Pogacar goes solo and he's on magnificent form, the best we've ever seen from the Slovenian, and he can hold off Jonas Vingegaard, Primož Roglič, and a host of other Jumbo-Visma riders back there that are just 30 seconds, along with UAE Team Emirates riders back there that could all come together. Jumbo can chase, and they can beat Wout van Aert at the top. Tadej Pogacar would blow his wad the whole way going up the Col de Galibier, dropping down the descent for 30K. Wout van Aert would catch his teammates back there and pull them back. It's not a question of ever going up the road when you have Wout van Aert up the road, unless, of course, everybody back there, Jonas Vingegaard, Enric Mas, Geraint Thomas, Adam Yates, Bardet, unless all those riders are having a bad day, you really have no choice, because once the Jumbo-Visma guys get over the top of this climb, Wout van Aert will go to work. Now, we continue further up the Galibier. The next couple mistakes that are made, the biggest ones, there was attacks left and right still from Jonas Vingegaard and Primož Roglič, and I think they made a bit of a mistake, and I said it live on NBC that I thought Jumbo-Visma dropped the golden egg here when they didn't let Tadej Pogacar go up the road. If they'd let him go up the road at that moment, maybe Tadej Pogacar goes full gas and he's starting to think about 2021 Tour de France, Stage 8, when he dropped everyone. But could be that with some time up there for Tadej Pogacar, and his directors might just be going, hey, wait a minute, this is a lot of effort right here going up the Galibier, and then we got a 30-kilometer descent all the way into Col de Grenade. It might not be a very good idea. Well, they didn't use that tactic anyways, so we see some bunch more attacks, and then all of a sudden, we'll see that Tadej Pogacar is finally sitting on the Jumbo-Visma train up there for Primož Roglič. We look further back, and there's a group chasing back there. It's got Movistar and DSM on the front. They're working for Romain Bardet and, of course, Enric Mas. But we got UAE Team Emirates Soler in there. We're getting ready to start coming through the feed zone, and Soler throws in a massive attack, clearing the gap and going across to the favorites up front. This was a knucklehead move. You had Tadej Pogacar sitting on Primož Roglič up at the front with Jonas Vingegaard sitting on And then you had Soler sitting on the group behind with DSM in that group pulling, Movistar pulling, and you know FDJ would get to the front eventually like they do here on today's stage 11 later. But Solerism goes to work. He jumps across the gap doing a massive effort to bridge this gap, and when he does, he gets up there to the front group, and then Primož Roglič throws in an acceleration. That'll pop Soler off the back. Primož Roglič will slow down a bit, Soler will come back on, and instead of waiting on the back and trying to recover from that massive effort, Solerism goes to work and starts pulling on the front. Now look at the picture. You got Soler pulling on the front, you got a group back there chasing, and you know they're going to catch with just one Soler pulling on the front. And behind that group, you got Brandon McNulty either swinging last on that group or just off the back, depending on what time the picture shows up. And then behind him is Rafael Majka, UAE team members chasing. Tadej Pogačar had a lot of cards to play right here. The directors failed him, Tadej Pogačar failed, Marc Soler failed, and all his teammates that are still left in the race at this moment in time, Brandon McNulty and Rafael Majka failed, because you could always get on the radio and just say, hey, stop, I'm behind, I'm still pretty good, I can do something if I get to the front, just stop attacking. Well, Primož Roglič throws in a big attack, and then we're going to see that it's Tadej Pogačar that counters the Slovenian as he goes full gas. It's Slovenian on Slovenian damage here. It's Primož Roglič just going out the back. Only problem for Tadej Pogačar, well, he's got some company, and it's called Jonas Vingegaard. He had Geraint Thomas with him, and he had Romain Bardet with him, and Romain Bardet will end up throwing in another acceleration and attack with about 2 kilometers to go, and then Tadej Pogačar will catch the Frenchman and throw in his next attack to go over the top of the Galibier with only one rider on his wheel. But guess what? It's the biggest threat here at the Tour de France, Jonas Vingegaard, that's locked on his wheel. And Jonas Vingegaard hasn't had to do much work going up the Galibier once its first original attacks of about 5, 6, 7 attacks started. Jonas Vingegaard's been sitting on the wheel the whole time, while Tadej Pogačar pulled 4, 5 kilometers up the Galibier and attacked 5, 6, 7 times going up the Galibier that we caught on camera. Going over the top, this is what I said. What are you going to do, Tadej Pogačar, once you go over the top? It's a 30-kilometer descent, and Tadej Pogačar can't do anything because he knows he's got Jonas Vingegaard sitting on his wheel, and Jonas isn't going to do anything. So they get caught from behind. We see the attack from Romain Bardet. Geraint Thomas is just behind Romain Bardet. We see Jonas Vingegaard and Tadej Pogačar chasing those two to all come back together. Now, coming down the descent. This is what I think what really decides this stage 11 of the Tour de France. You look at the size group, it starts getting massive. They catch Wout van Aert, who goes straight out the back, grabs the next group behind, being led by FDJ, with Rafael Majka in that group, and with Primož Roglič, and pulls everything back together with about 13 kilometers to go. Once those guys get back together and start pulling on the front, we'll see just as they were getting caught when I back the film up, that's Rafael Majka raising his hand. He's raising his hands to get water, cokes, gels, food, whatever he needs and whatever Tadej Pogačar needs. So when I back the film up, before he got on at about 16 kilometers to go, I want to back it up because when there's chaos and everybody's going curb to curb, Tadej Pogačar is the one guy in there without any teammates that's trying to win the Tour de France. Jonas Vingegaard has a massive amount of teammates, so if he needs calories, he knows he can get it from one of his other mates. We see that Ineos have multiple riders in there with Yates and Geraint Thomas, so they're taken care of and they can always be looked after. The other guys without teammates, they're not trying to win the Tour de France, so they know if they go back to the car, most likely someone's not going to try to attack them. But if Tadej Pogačar goes back to the car, he will get attacked. So throughout the whole descent, you know he doesn't have time to go back to the car and get the calories that he needs. Now, while going up the Galibier, I saw the Slovenian have some ice pack in his back right up here, so he must have seen the car at some point in time. And then near the top, I saw him with 2 bottles on his bike instead of 1. So the cameras missed him getting fed, but he must have found some way to get some calories. And when he got those 2 bottles near the top of the Galibier, it had 2 gels. But if he got bottles individually and not a musette, then he wouldn't have food in there. He would just have the 2 gels going down the descent off the Galibier. That means it's not a whole lot of calories. Now, all of a sudden, we go fast forward to the bottom of the Galibier with about 4 kilometers to go before the Col de Grenade starts. And you know, as you see there with Tadej Pogačar and Rafael Majka come together, that Rafael Majka is going to give a bottle to Tadej Pogačar, and that reinforces what I'm trying to tell you guys, that through the chaos of the 30-kilometer descent, there's no way the Slovenian, Tadej Pogačar, could have gone back and gotten bottles, or he would have gotten attacked. But now, Jumbo-Visma have made a tactical error. They went back and they calmed everything down. There was a bomb thrown at the beginning of the Galibier, a bomb thrown that was at the top of the KOM that existed because Tadej Pogacar blew everything up. Now all the bomb coming down the descent where guys were attacking all the way down the descent, and Tadej Pogacar had to cover moves all over the place. As we get down with Wout van Aert on the front, he's going to calm everything down, right? This is the problem. Jumbo-Visma wanted chaos. They got chaos. It's been working great. Now Jumbo-Visma tactics are to calm everything down. With Wout van Aert on the front with the last few K going into Col de Grenade, that allows the teammate there of UAE team members, Rafael Majka, like I said, to give him bottles or feed him. But the only problem is there's not a whole lot of kilometers. So Tadej Pogacar's got to be wise enough to ask for it. And of course, Rafael Majka has to have it. We see they do exchange bottles, no problem. So Tadej Pogacar is at least hydrated to start the Col de Grenade. Wout van Aert drills it into there and he goes full gas. Primoz Roglic can only pull for about 200 meters. He's done. Then Rafael Majka is going to come to the front. This looks like another mistake right here from UAE team members because Rafael Majka could have just sat back and let it calm. But when you think about Tadej Pogacar, what he would normally want if he's 100% healthy, 100% fed, 100% hydrated, when you start the Col de Grenade, you'd want your teammate to drill it, go full gas into it, and then light him up. The only problem for Rafael Majka, he doesn't know that Tadej Pogacar is not full gas. Well, we see the attack from Nairo Quintana. Once Quintana goes up the road from Arkea Samsic, he's going full gas, and he's holding about an 8-second gap there on Rafael Majka. And we see Steven Kruijswijk, the last of the Jumbo-Visma helpers left in the group here, aside from Jonas Vingegaard. Steven Kruijswijk tries to do some acceleration, blows up. And of course, Rafael Majka gives him a little eye as he comes by him because he thinks they're going to win the Tour de France with Tadej Pogacar. Well, all of a sudden, the next attack comes from Romain Bardet, DSM. Romain Bardet goes, and there's still no reaction from Tadej Pogacar. So once we get under 5 kilometers to go, this is when we see the attack from Jonas Vingegaard. Vingegaard is explosive and immediately gets a gap on Tadej Pogacar. Rafael Majka is doing everything he can, but he's gapping off his teammate too. Wisely backs off, but can't do much more work and blows. Then we see Tadej Pogacar start opening up the gap to Jonas Vingegaard. Jonas Vingegaard's going up the road. He's catching everybody. Original breakaway guys that were left up the road, like Warren Barguil, he'll catch. He'll catch Bardet. He'll catch Nairo Quintana, and he'll go on to win stage 11 by 1 minute over second place here on the general classification in Nairo Quintana. What happened back there to Tadej Pogacar? And this is why I say Tadej Pogacar is still the best. I think it's just a calorie. Tactically, he did everything wrong. He spent too much time on the front, threw in attacks when you just did not need to throw any kind of attacks in. He had already been left without teammates on stage 4. He'd been left without teammates on stage 5. He won 2 stages with stage 6 and stage 7. And now all of a sudden, here we go on stage 11, and he was doing big-time bullets while he had Jonas Vingegaard sitting the whole time back there resting and eating and with teammates around him and without stress while Tadej Pogacar was going full gas. Now, Wout van Aert and Christophe Laporte really set up the tactics to go full gas. Like I said at the start of this episode, it takes a flame to light, so one team can light it, but you can blow that flame out as long as they sit on the front and the wind's too strong throughout the whole stage. But Tadej Pogacar always wanted to ride the front, so the flame never went out because every time they lit the flame, Tadej Pogacar went to the front and kept the wind off him, and behind, Jonas Vingegaard got a free ride, end up winning stage 11 of the Tour de France and taking a 2 minute and 22 second over Tadej Pogacar. Now, you guys will say, some of you guys that believe Jonas Vingegaard is the best climber in the world, I don't believe that, but I believe he is just about on par with Tadej Pogacar. But Primoz Roglic, I still have number 2 because he's on par with Tadej Pogacar and can beat him in the sprints. But for those of you that say Jonas Vingegaard dropped Tadej Pogacar, well, so did a lot of guys on today's stage. So you know it was a bad day tactically for Tadej Pogacar. If Nairo Quintana dropped him, if Bardet dropped him, if Geraint Thomas dropped him, if Davide Gaudu dropped him, and if Yates dropped Tadej Pogacar, it can't be because Jonas Vingegaard is the best climber in the world. It has to be because Tadej Pogacar had a bad day. Whether if it was tactically wrong and he just drove his legs into the ground, or if it had to do with calories like I believe up here on Beyond the Coverage, I don't know for sure 100%, but I know when there's 5 guys that drop Tadej Pogacar, even though Jonas Vingegaard won, it isn't because he's the best climber in the world, it's because Tadej Pogacar had a bad day. Now, make sure you guys like and subscribe. I'll cover stage 12 through 21 up here on Beyond the Coverage, so make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on tomorrow's Saturday edition of Beyond the Coverage real soon.